we suddenly need to increase our bandwidth in order to allow ourselves to explore technologies that were alien to the pharmaceutical industry only 10 years ago. This in turn means that we need to increasingly engage in cross-sector collaboration. This means that we are entering new type of partnership models. We suddenly realize that the role of exclusivity in our products is changing. If we adopt technology to complement a medicine, we don't necessarily need exclusivity on that technology. Which in turn means that we can collaborate and co-develop and co-invent in a very, very different way. And all this is basically driven by a very patient-centric approach towards medicine. So, in summary, we see that we are facing a new normal where we suddenly need a very different competence base inside our own company, and we need access to different type of competence outside AstraZeneca. We see cross-sector partnerships and collaborations really exploding in density. We need to engage in technology which is not our own turf. This in turn leads to that the old way of approaching collaborations doesn't really work very well anymore. And all of this is resulting in contributing to the business model evolution we see is happening. And that leads us to the question, how do we actually manage innovation? AstraZeneca is a company that is totally dependent on innovation. It's in our genes, it's bread and butter for the company. But if we look and spend a few minutes on asking ourselves, how do we actually manage innovation? And this is by no means a picture of only AstraZeneca. I think this is valid for all big corporations. So if we realize that we are pushed by technology and the speed by which technology impacts industry, you have all seen this representation of Moore's law, which is all about the pace by which technology develops. But if we now leave technology and talk about management, what has changed management? Well, there has been a number of revolutions in that space as well, but they are fewer and they are at much less speed. So we had the Industrial Revolution a couple of hundred years ago with the spin jennies and the manufacturing of clothing. We had the development of the conveyor belt in 1910. Then the Toyota lean manufacturing impacted industry a lot. And today we all talk about agile organizations. But if we now look on innovation and we look on how we drive that process inside our corporations, a lot of senior people in industry have been promoted historically because they have been skilled in optimizing systems and processes and productivity. If we believe that AI and machine learning will develop the way we think it will, it will probably be better in optimizing any factory than any human being in the future. This means that we increasingly needs to move towards a management that is all about orchestrating creativity and innovation. And this is very different from optimizing the process. And with Dimension Hub, we really want to contribute to this cultural shift inside AstraZeneca. So what we wanted to do was to create a physical environment and a business model that would allow us to explore industry sectors outside pharma. So what we have done is to build the Dimension Hub according to the philosophy of non-competitive complementarity. By bringing together companies that do not compete on a product, المشكلة إنه بسبب كورونا ما يقدر إنه يجي على هون على كوريا، فهو جالس عم يسوي لايف، جالس عم يشرح. In addition, we have moved 4 different industry sectors together. So it is about companies developing drugs, it's about medtech companies, it's ICT, and it is diagnostics. And the combination of these skill sets will be the foundation for the products.
ممكن تروحوا على مبنى BTS أكيد من عيوني.
If we look upon partnerships, the pharma industry is really used to collaborating in order to source innovation.
أوكي أنا بروح لمبنى BTS وبكتب أسماءكم. تعالوا عندنا على الانستغرام اعطوني اسماءكم، راح اختار 10 منكم وبكتبهم على مبنى BTS وصورهم لكم.
But when we want to engage with an IT company, we realize that the business logics doesn't matter. We have a product development time of between 10 to 15 years. It's very difficult to engage with an IT
حبايبي لايف
company
اليوم،
and tell
حبايبي
them
لايف
that
اليوم
it
راح
will
يكون
take 8
شيء
years to
كثير
launch the product.
مفيد وهيك.
All we know is that
لازم
their
تروحوا
technology will
تتابعون
probably be
تابعوا معايا
obsolete
اللايف.
when we reach the market. So how should we create an opportunity to really engage with these type of companies with the purpose to capitalize disruptive innovation? And that leads us to the BioVenture Hub. And this is our R&D site in Sweden. It is unique in the
المفاجأة
sense
بكرة إن
that
شاء
it
الله بتنزل.
actually contains all competences throughout the entire value chain in the pharmaceutical industry.
اوكي الناس اللي راح يدوروا معايا في اللايف اليوم راح اكتب اسمائهم في مبنى BTS.
And what we have done is to open up the site, and we have moved in some 40 external companies from more than 5 countries who are having their business inside.
اكيد راح احفظ البث بس اتمنى انكم
And
تضلوا
you can
معايا.
argue that the model is about applying the sharing economy to industry. We are doing this in collaboration with the Swedish government, so it's a private-public partnership with both the region of Western Sweden and the Swedish government. It
المفاجأة
is
بكرة إن
open
شاء الله.
to external companies provided they match a selection profile.
شكراً
We have been
حبايبي، شكراً
very
كثير.
restrictive with
المهم
respect to
انكم عم
what
تشوفوا
companies
وراي
we
في
bring
كثير
in.
صحافة.
And the reason for that is that we
يعني
really
هالمكان
want
مخصص
to
للصحافة.
avoid competition on
المكان
a product.
مخصص لنا احنا.
So none of these companies
وبكرة
actually
إن شاء الله
compete
المفاجأة
neither
كثير
with
حلوة.
AstraZeneca nor between themselves on a product, but they are all synergistic when it comes to technology and human capital skills. And the model allows these companies to access the infrastructure of AstraZeneca and access the competence inside AstraZeneca. And the public funding is used to reimburse AstraZeneca for costs associated with supporting these companies. And besides the fact that it is totally integrated the way you see in this picture, so the hub is located in the purple buildings. The other thing that makes this very unique is that it is actually not an attempt to attract innovation. It's not for startups. We totally focus on supporting scale-up companies. And typically, if you look on small startups, the type of competences that have made them successful during research is not the type of competence they will need throughout development. That's typically competence that resides within industry. And by making this available to these companies, we have seen that we can really catalyze their growth. We talked about the fact that this is non-competitive, and it is really a big part of the success here.
حطوني في
We talked
الكتاب.
about the fact that the dimension which we call the 4 Ds, drugs, diagnostics, devices, and digital. And AstraZeneca actually doesn't hold any legal rights to any of the innovation that takes place inside this environment. That may seem a bit odd, but it has really
ان
allowed
شاء
us
الله
to
بكرة راح
attract the
تشوفوني
best
هيك في
companies.
الكتاب هيك.
And I think
راح يحطوني
nobody
هيك.
is in a better position to partner with these companies than we are. So the way it works is that these companies represented by the clocks on this picture, they all have different needs, and they either directly
قديش الساعة
interact with
عندكم
our
الحين
people
حبايبي؟
on site, or they approach the BioVenture Hub team who basically direct them towards the competence inside AstraZeneca that could help them. And in this way, we can really make our human
فطرتوا ولا
capital,
لسه؟
our knowledge available to these companies. as I said, it's not only
الكتاب
about
بيتحدث عن
titles.
كتير
So
أشياء.
what we have done in order to really support companies that are, for example, in digital health, is to connect
هذا الكتاب
partners
بيتحدث
to
عن
this
البروغرام.
ecosystem. So we have IBM, which are providing these companies access to their open innovation platform.
بيتحدث
And we
عن
have
design
المغربيه,
time and
which is a
space
global medtech company.
وadaptive
So
implementation.
in essence, these SMEs
بيتحدث عن
can get
الناس
access
اللي
to
ناجحة
competence from
في
3 different
حياتهم،
industry verticals.
وبيتحدث عن هيك مؤتمرات يعني كتير
If we
أشياء.
now look on value, we often get asked, so if you have no rights, what is the meaning of doing this? And since we started this in 2015, the School of Economics and Law in Sweden have followed the development of the Bioventure Hub, and it has really been about development. We have treated this as a huge experiment in business
أنا كنقول
development.
لك بزاف أنا بعد كنقول.
We have changed it basically every day. And when I get asked, what would you have done differently? I say nothing because we have already changed it 300 times. So the studies they have made has really focused on understanding how is value created inside an ecosystem like this. And there are 2 dimensions here. One is about value creation for society. And this is really all about strengthening the ecosystem that in essence results in economic and social growth. It's about catalyzing the entrepreneurial climate within Sweden. It's of course about employment, and it is about attraction of talent and knowledge to the nation. So if that is the value creation part, the value caption part is the value for us at Seneca. And for us, when we started this, it was really about the soft values. We regarded this more as a culture project than a tech project. We wanted to impact our organizational culture. We wanted to strengthen our employer branding, and it's all about relations and trust. These small companies basically put themselves in the belly of Goliath when they move into AstraZeneca. If we look on the hard values, and here it is important to say that the higher you get in this hierarchy of values, the more efforts is required from the host organization. So organizational culture, it is impacted by itself. But if we want to use the Bioventure Hub to share cost and risk, to really create new innovation projects, to change the way we partner, and even generate direct revenue, we need to engage much more heavily in these companies, and that is happening. So if we look on the value creation for society, we have been awarded the best investment for the Swedish Innovation Agency for the last couple of years, because employment has really gone up and all those parameters have been very positively impacted. If you look on AstraZeneca values, all the soft ones have been delivered, and we are now focusing on basically working on the hard parts of value capturing, but we need to do it without jeopardizing the value creation dimension. The hub is open to companies from any nation. So far we have companies that have moved in from the US, Switzerland, UK, Holland. We have a huge interest from other nations as well. That said, the cultural part is really one of the success factors here, because Sweden is a super small country. Still, we have created companies like Skype, Spotify, Volvo, Ericsson, IKEA. It can go on forever. And doing that with a population of less than 10 million people have forced us to work in a different way when it comes to sharing competence and knowledge. And that is really what we have built the Bioventure Hub on. And all in all, this is evolving. We are growing it. We are increasingly moving away from bringing in biotech companies. You could argue that these are companies with the same type of competence as we have, but applied to a different problem. We are now increasingly focusing on companies with different type of competences, but who are addressing the same type of problems that we are interested in. So this is an environment that contains gaming companies. It is an environment that contains ICT companies that historically have worked with the automotive industry, where we realize that the way they deal with big data analysis is of huge relevance to the pharma industry. We work with companies that are in environmental area, but what they all have in common is that they have technology that is of relevance for the products of tomorrow in the pharmaceutical industry. And with that, I would like to stop, and I hope you found this energizing. I think we need to be innovative also in how we deal with innovation.
أنا ولينا
We very often
اجينا
talk
على المكان
about
الغلط.
what to innovate, but very seldom how we innovate. And this is an attempt to complement the innovation process within AstraZeneca.
هذا مو الطبق الخامس؟ جد؟ خلينا نروح خلينا نتأكد.
انت فاتحه لايف؟
أنا فاتحة لايف. جرسة لايف؟ ليش؟ خلينا نسأل. 혹시 죄송한데 여기 5층 맞죠?
여기 3층.
3층이에요? 빨리 가자. 씨. احنا اجينا على المكان الغلط. يا ربي لهيك الرئيس جالس عم يتصل علي وينك فانا بقول له انا وراك، بقول لي هو انا قدام ما بقدر اني اشوفك. يا ربي المهم لينا معايا. هاي يا ربي.
شو صدق اجينا
والله
and you were taking it so seriously.
yes we were just like taking it so seriously. يا ربي قديش انا غبية.
you know I first اول ما جيت طلعت على الطابق الخامس رجعوني
جد؟
كنت فوق رجعوني بعتوني لتحت.
جد طلعت الخامس. يا ربي ايش هذا مسكينة. احنا الحين المكان الغلط والرئيس تبعي جالس عم يتصل فيا. انت وينك يا ابني؟ انا بقول له انا هون انا موجودة. يا ربي عاش انت. بالك يجينا على هذا الطابق. اوكي احنا هون. هذا هو الطابق اللي لازم نجيله بالاول. بس احنا اجينا على الطابق الغلط. يا ربي بسرعة هون افتح الباب.
여기에 규제를 너무 엄격하게 가하는 것보다는 오히려 그 ESG를 잘 도입한 혹은 산업 혹은 기업 기관을 좀 더 혜택을 주는 방향으로 그쪽으로 좀 가야 되지 않을까? 그래서 더 많은 게 참여할 수 있도록 가야지. 아까 말씀하신 이머징한 어떤 이머징 마켓이나 그런 국가들도 성장하지 않을까 이런 생각을 좀 해봤고요. 녹색 성장 관련 일자리 창출 관련해서는 저희 K.E.Y 같은 경우는 두 가지.
뭐야 나 5층인 줄 알았는데 3층이었어요. 아까부터 계속 방송하고 있었는데. 진짜요? 나 지금 1분 동안 하고 거기서
젊은이들을 저희가 전문 창업 지원 센터를 만들었습니다. 그래서 여기서 그 사람들에게 컨설팅을 해주고 자금도 지원해주고 성공할 수 있는 그런 어떤 지원을 열심히 하고 있고요. 두 번째는 공교롭게도 저희가 굿자리라는 일자리를 소개하는 박람회를 하고 있어요. 이게 지금 10년 정도 저희가 끌고 왔는데 한 2만여 명이 저희 이 박람회를 통해서 취업에 성공하고 있는 상황인데 향후에는 두 가지를 생각하고 있습니다. 어떤 거냐면 이민자들 혹은 국제결혼 가정이라든가 탈북민 가정에서 북한에서 탈출해서 들어온 어떤 저희 쪽에 온 가정의 자녀들이 혹은 사람들이 취업할 수 있게끔 좀 더 지원해주고 그다음에 저희하고 저희 회사, 저희 금융그룹과 거래하고 있는 기업들 중에 우수 기업에 특히 친환경 관련된 기업이라든가 이런 쪽에 많은 젊은이들이 청년들이 취업할 수 있도록 저희들이 알선하거나 주선하는 그런 역할을 하고 있습니다.
That's a fascinating insight. Jin, thank you so much. That's really interesting to hear. And to pick up on a couple of those aspects with Jeffrey
هذا هو
University of
رئيسي.
Design Finance.
المهم احنا وصلنا للمكان الصح،
Jin
فالحين راح
mentioned
اصور
this
لكم
importance
كل شيء.
of everybody working out their priorities, their criteria in a similar way so that people are running ahead. And I guess also in light of the global shared experience of COVID, and I know a lot of your clients have as host companies and as individuals have had personal experiences of this devastating disease, but I wonder if you could just express the kind of the advice that you give, and also the importance for us to come together and to have the same kind of criteria as Jin was talking about when it comes to trying to bring people and bring different parts of the world together.
Great, thanks, Cassia. So Gazelle Finance is a private equity fund manager that invests in the Eastern Partnership countries. So it's really the frontier market countries of Europe, on the edge, the former Soviet Union countries that are just right on the axis between Russia and Eastern Europe. And we're certainly sort of at the sort of spearhead of pushing the boundaries of bringing ESG practices, to these companies, because when you're a 4,000 GDP per capita country, you're making trade-off decisions when you're building out your working capital strategy, your investment strategy. Are you going to take the same actions that you're going to take as required by an EU country? So those are trade-off decisions. But I can tell you that for Gazelle Finance, what we're able to do is turn sort of ESG into an opportunity. And in fact, I would say it's often an incentive, and it does filter out the great companies from the less great companies. The companies that want to have institutional capital, want to improve their governance structures, that want to have better approaches to labor practices and environment as well. And so then, if you look at us, most of our investment capital is often multilateral and bilateral capital. So we have capital from Dutch investor FMO and in the United States, EFC, formerly known as OPIC. And so they have standards, and there's no doubt that those standards are not always consistent across each other. And so what we have to do in those circumstances is take the most aggressive one and apply it to all, right? So I wish that standards could be standardized, and I think this is always a dynamic that's been going on and often led by a lot of the multilateral institutions. But it's a constant game of trade-offs, and I've seen this happen in the clean tech industry before ESG became so big. What is clean tech? How do you define it? And we're going through that as well with impact. So these what often happens with things like ESG is they get co-opted. And certain companies say they're doing ESG and they're doing it at a lesser standard than others. And you end up having, it ends up taking the brand of ESG investing and actually diminishes it to some degree. I don't know if there is ever going to be a mechanism that you can unify every country and every investment platform and investors and recipients of investment capital to take a completely standardized approach. But that is something that I think is an issue that has to be constantly focused on, because ESG to Blackstone is different than ESG to Gazelle Finance, and it will always be different, just given the scale of the way we invest and our strategies for investing.
I wonder in that case, Jeffrey, thank you. And I just want to say to everybody watching, this is such a unique opportunity. We've got two different continents talking to each other about something so incredible coming together. If you've got questions, please do share them. I've got lots, but it's up to you guys to also get involved and get your questions through to this esteemed panel of experts. But I wonder on that note, from what Jeffrey was saying, Professor Hyun-Sang Yu, if I could bring you back in, because you touched upon this when it comes to Korea not having this a complete one understanding of ESG, and now we're talking, Jeffrey's talking about across different continents, and never a homogenized understanding of ESG. I wonder if you could just touch upon the points that do bring these two, I guess, culturally very different, economically fast-growing and aspirational parts of the world together. But what does bring them together, and so what can we aspire towards in the future?
She didn't get hurt.
ESG가 미국이나 유럽 같은 그 선진국에서는 조금 보편화되어 있고 시간이 좀 오래돼서 개념이 잡혀 있고 지금 그 토론하는 과정에서도 한국도 아직 좀 혼란스럽고 동유럽 쪽도 정리가 좀 덜 돼 있다라고 얘기를 하고 있는데요. 어떤 시각도 있냐면 선진국들이 후진국들을 새로운 식민지화시키기 위해서 푸시하는 정책이 아닌가 하는 아주 극단적인 주장도 존재하고 있을 뿐더러 이게 보이지 않는 또 비관세 장벽을 만들면서 선진국들이 조금 좀 억압하는 정책이다 이런 얘기들이 있어서 지금은 속도 조절이 필요할 것 같고 조금 전에 말씀드린 대로 어떤 채찍보다는 당근을 줘서 조금 이 분위기라든가 글로벌 스탠다드에서 컨센서스를 이룰 수 있는 제도적인 환경이 만들어지고 얘기를 해야 되는데 지금 보면 몇몇 선진국에서 일방적으로 상당히 속도를 내는 이런 경향이 있어서 그렇게 되면 결국 아까 몇몇 패널 분들도 말씀하셨지만 한국이나 이런 나라들이 특히 코로나 때문에 글로벌 그 밸류 체인이나 서플라이 체인이 망가진다든지 문제들이 많이 생기고 있는데 한국과 같이 그런 그 글로벌 서플라이 체인을 활용해서 하는 비즈니스하는 국가는 한국도 책임을 져야 되고 관련된 모든 그 개발도상국에 관련된 것까지 다 책임을 지면서 비즈니스를 해봐라 이거를
صوتي مو مفهوم صوتي مو واضح الحين بتسمعوني منيح قلت لكم انه هذا مؤتمر تبع الجلوبال انفلونسرز وبيتحدثون عن هيك اشياء يعني كيف الانفلونسرز يعني صاروا يعني راح احكي اللغه العربيه يعني صاروا رواد في هذا يعني الشغل وهيك يعني يورجون الناس كثير اشياء من خلال البلاتفورم تبعهم فأتمنى انكم تضلوا معايا للاخير.
Labour flow as well, because that's something that is important for these particular nations. And yet, of course, with COVID, as Jeffrey has touched upon, the COVID it's just a huge impact on what we would normally expect to see.
Oh, yes, big time. I will cover this, Kasia, but maybe I will refer back to our panelists about, the taxonomy, about a different understanding, and it is an absolutely fascinating discussion, I must tell you. I want to refer a little bit to, greenwashing and actually how much we need this common measures able to actually assess what to get with. We've been there. It's almost like if we're talking about not having something that is broadly understandable the same, I think we will be able to in the circle. So if we want to really
هذا الجهاز بخليكم يعني يشرح لكم الكلام اللي ما بيفهم انجليزي يشرح لهم الكلام وهيك ومثلا اذا حكيت انجليزي وكوري ما يفهموني يحطوا السماعه على اذنيهم وراح تترجم لهم هاي باللغه الكوريه. اوكي حتى هاي موجوده بدي اجربها خلوني اجربها.
So from this perspective we do need to have some common denominators about what we really understand as green. I will refer maybe to have a segue to right now that recently we were looking at a fascinating EU report from January 2021 that said that 42% of companies
عم اسمع اللغة الكورية.
being green or products being green are exaggerated, misleading, or simply false.
%가 아예 거짓이거나 아니면 과장되었다라고 합니다. 그렇기 때문에 제 생각에는
تسمعوا اللغة الكورية؟
Private Paris Agreement, as you all might remember, is focusing on the national contributions. So the countries themselves are saying how much they can contribute to the transition. So I'm a big advocate for having it as unified as possible, but of course I agree with the panelists that there is like a huge work to be done about the data analytics, about understanding, and also about some sort of the debate and the consensus that we need to reach. Now, coming back to the trade, let me again be referred to the EU. Recently, in January, our EU Commissioner for Trade, Dombrovskis, was talking about the new EU trade strategy. And the strategy was broken about
أوكي أنا راح أكتب اسمكم.
one really the post-pandemic recovery and how much is needed, how much we need to trade to recover from that.
أول اسم اللي هو طيبة.
Paris Agreement.
طيبة في مؤتمر كوريا.
Being an essential element of the new EU trade deals. This sends a signal, yes. So it shows that actually we will be taking it quite seriously, and we're talking right now about the rule-based trade.
سيلين في مؤتمر كوريا.
Want to have a trade with the European Union? It needs to be green. It needs to be digital. It needs to make sure that somehow it supports the EU strategy around.
حمد في مؤتمر كوريا.
رضوى أوكي. How we are dealing with WTO, how the trade agreements are going to
اسمك يا رضوى.
in the future, and also how is it going to be monitored. Now, I know that, from the ESG, I always have this tendency to covering this E part, and very rightfully, Yukasha asked about the SMG part, so as the part of the workforce flow.
Dina, okay.
Clearly, working with our clients, what is going on right now.
Dina.
We are talking about totally different work after the pandemic, and the workforce flows quite significantly.
شهد في مؤتمر صحفي.
A lot of businesses, but I would say in general, especially when we're talking right now about emerging Europe and I think we did relatively well. As it comes to hybrid working, as it comes to remote working and so on. Clearly, the vaccination program and how quickly is it going to proceed in all the countries will have a huge impact on how quickly we are going to go back to the new normal. It is not a coincidence that the name of our panel is Being Back Better Together. So maybe better together also means, slightly revised working environments and working models. So I do hope that the post-pandemic situation will bring also new opportunities for having more innovative and modern way of working and cooperating.
Agnieszka, thank you. I was worried actually to hear about how there's a lack of that percentage that you said, that there's a lack of confidence in ESG, and it was quite staggering to hear that. But just
راح اكتب بس لهاجر بعد شوي كمان بكتب اسماءكم. اوكي الحين خلونا نستمع للمؤتمر. سويت لكم خاطر.
It's very much gripped, and our hearts and prayers go out towards the people there. But we've been so gripped in this pandemic. Jin, how do we then come out of this and genuinely build that better and work together and also build confidence so that people do believe in, and companies do believe in greener and a better and a more transparent transparent way of doing business and building the economy.
그 중견자 제가 말씀드렸듯이 그 ESG는 그 단계별 적용을 하는 게 좋은 거라고 생각을 합니다. 예를 들어서 팬데믹 이후에라도 이제 저희들이 지금 충분히 그 기후라든가 이런 변화의 리스크에 대해서 이제 인지를 하게 됐는데 아프리카가 그 탄소 매출량이 전 세계 탄소 매출량의 4%라고 합니다. 근데 만약에 ESG 어떤 기준을 그대로
هذا الشخص اللي هون
아프리카는 성장하기가 아마 어려울 것 같습니다.
هذا الشخص اللي هون هو شخص كتير عالي هون في كوريا، يعني معروف هون في كوريا وهيك. فاليوم هو اجى على المؤتمر مشان يتكلم في هذا الموضوع اللي سويته اليوم. فأنا كتير يعني فرحانة إني شفته، وأتمنى إنه لما يخلص المؤتمر أتمنى إني ألتقي فيه يعني شخصيا أسلم عليه.
밀레니얼 세대와 Z 세대라는 용어가 있습니다. 1980년대
اوكي بعد شوي راح اكتب اسماءكم من جديد حبايبي، لا تخافوا، راح اكتب اسماءكم من جديد بعد شوي.
친구들 20한 20살에서 40살 이내에 있는 이런 분들을 저희가 MZ 세대라고 불리는데 이 사람들의 소비 패턴이 굉장히 그린 휴머라고 해서 그냥 옛날에 그 어떤 브랜드에 맹신해서 사는 그런 소비자가 아니라 생각하는 소비자입니다. 이 사람들은 공정성, 인권, 친환경, 동물 복지 같은 다양한 분야에서 관심을
هدول هم الشركات اللي متعاونة مع المؤتمر تبعنا اللي سويناه. فأكبر الشركات مثل IBK، إنهي، وسامسونج، ويعني شنان، هدول البنكات تبع كوريا. فسامسونج معاهم، SKT، LG، يعني كل CG، كل
이머징 시장이 또 발전하는 성장하는 여러 나라들이 고르게 그 성장할 수 있는 어떤 기회를 가질 거라고 생각을 하고 있고, 저희 KB 금융 그룹도 저희가 갖고 있는 이 자금이 그 이런 어떤 친환경적인 기업이라든가 이런 쪽에 좀 더 많이 갈 수 있도록 자금 지원이 될 수 있도록 더 노력하겠습니다.
Thank you so much. Well, let's pick up with Jeffrey on some of this, because I love that idea. The MC generation, that they're so woke and they understand what they're doing in terms of they look into stuff. They just don't go blindly. They perhaps are slightly Jeffrey older generation as we are kind to ourselves, but this younger generation is more understanding of what it wants, and they're more demanding ultimately, as Jim Nelson was suggesting, was implying. How do businesses in that case adapt to that to ensure that they're socially investing and adhering to that kind of drive that this NZ generation is taking us?
Well, I agree with Jimmy on that. I don't think one size fits all. And back to the original question about standards, how do you apply the standards? And I think there's always going to be gradation or heterogeneity on standards. But ultimately, whether it's K.E.Y or Gazelle, we have to be not just reactive, proactive about trends in the marketplace. And so the future generation, the Z generation, those are the future consumers that are driving consumption of businesses that we're supporting, right? And there's no doubt, and I go back to my original point, that ESG can be built into a benefit to businesses if done right. I mean, if you look at governance, for example, you want good governance in your portfolio, whether K.E.Y is investing in a company or I as a private equity fund are investing in a company, because I get better performance with better governance. And I have better risk mitigation if they're not doing stupid things environmentally. Because if there's a major oil spill or something like that, I mean, you saw in Russia with the major oil disaster, or it was actually a mining company, it's a major disaster. You don't think of Russia being as innovative on ESG, but that company has major issues now with government because of that. So risk mitigation makes complete sense. And so if you look at the end consumer, which is the word woke means many things now in America. It's kind of a crazy word, but a new generation that expects more from its companies and building a brand around proper ESG standards, whether it's environmental, social, or governance. You're going to sell more product, to that generation. I do think it's a complex issue when you start talking about countries like Africa versus the frontier markets that we're dealing with, and the trade-off decisions that are being made in terms of are you generate energy from coal, gas, or renewables. And I don't think it's an easy answer. But I do think that if you are a consumer and you are getting per GDP growth that's occurring, and you're going up the chain of value, and you're starting to generate more wealth and wanting better things, you start being more aware of where those products come from and what those products represent, and become more conscious of it. So it depends on how far you want to get ahead of the curve. And there's going to be certain companies that are going to be ahead of the curve. They're going to serve those expecting youth that's going to be the future market driving consumption, or you're going to be behind the curve. And I think those companies that are ahead of the curve ultimately for the long term will be rewarded. And then I think it becomes an issue of shareholders and stakeholders. Shareholders, short-term perspective driving quarterly returns versus those investors that can take a long-term perspective. And I think guys like Tesla and Elon Musk have proven that if you have that long-term perspective, you can absolutely change the market. Electric cars was nothing, and now look where we are. It was because someone had a long-term strategy, and it moved all the major players. I mean, how did one company move an entire market when all the major automotive players didn't move the market? And so I think you're going to see that. Going back to your point about the MC generation, that those companies that are going to take that long-term risk are going to be the future unicorns, right? And those are the companies that are going to really generate value long-term.
Jeffrey, some fascinating points. We need a couple of days to discuss all of this. There's so much to talk about. But let's get Professor K.E.Y back in on this, because when Jeffrey's talking about governments also being involved and talking about risk mitigation and the forward-thinking companies as well. Are there any companies in your mind that you've already seen being those forward-thinking ones that are ahead of the curve, as Jeffrey was mentioning? And also, I wonder if you could just throw in from your kind of academic point of view, how important it is for governments to be on board in this, and when it comes to Southeast Asia, how are those governments doing? Are they on board?
안타깝게도 그 이슈에 대해서는 한국 내에서는 좋은 사례를 찾기는 좀 어려울 것 같고요. 말씀드린 대로 한국이란 나라는 재벌 위주로 빠른 시간 내에 경제 성장을 보도를 했었기 때문에 가버넌스 이슈가 오히려 조금 문제가 되는 것 때문에 아까도 말씀드렸는데 유럽이나 선진국에서는 ESG라고 하면은 주로 환경 문제를 얘기를 하는데 지금 한국에서는 ESG를 얘기하면 오히려 가버넌스 이슈가 기본적인 게 해결이 안 됐기 때문에 그 부분을 풀어야 된다라는 논의부터 해서 아주 걸음마 단계라고 볼 수가 있고요. 그 다음에 소셜 이슈로 넘어가고 그 다음에 환경 이슈로 가야 될 것 같다라고 얘기를 하고 있는데 가버넌스 이슈가 풀기가 단기간 내에 좀 한국에서는 좀 어려워 보이고요. 다만 한국에서 유니콘 기업들도 많이 나오고 스타트업들이 활발해지면서 그들은 투자자들하고 상당히 좋은 관계를 맺으면서 지금 곧 이제 한국도 많이 변화가 될 거라고 보이고 있는데 지금 상태에서는 ESG에 대한 개념 자체가 아까 여러분들도 말씀하신 대로 글로벌 각국이 가지고 있는 생각들도 많이 다르고요. 이게 개념 정립도 완벽하게 되어 있지도 않고 컨센서스가 이루어져 있지도 않다 보니까 다 각자 생각하는 게 너무 달라서 빠른 시간 내에 이런 컨퍼런스나 이런 것들이 많이 만들어져서 컨센서스를 만들 수 있는 장이 만들어지고 그걸 토대로 차근차근 가면서 장기적으로 가야 될 거다라고 생각이 되기 때문에 불행히도 내년이나 후년에 이런 기회가 있으면 한국에 좋은 사례가 있으면 다시 안내해드리도록 하겠습니다.
Well, absolutely, let's put a date in our diaries immediately and get another conference underway. Professor, thank you. So Agnieszka, in terms of these future unicorn companies, especially with Poland, and the government there is quite interesting because the country historically very coal-based, as that part of the world has had a history with that kind of industry. How is that part of the world now looking in terms of the way the governments work in supporting companies, or perhaps not when it comes to ESG?
Well, for this we definitely need another conference, but let me just maybe give you a little bit of overview of what is going on. Clearly, we are part of the European Union. Clearly, we are part of the European Green Deal. And clearly there is lots of tension, and it's not only for Poland, there's similar situation in Romania and in a couple of other countries as well. Not to talk about Russia or the stances. This is a situation that definitely needs to be taken into account. I would say it is not a coincidence that as part of the whole European Green Deal, you have something that is called just transition plans and just transition fund. It is quite obvious that the countries, the regions who have been coal dominated in the past will have challenges connected with the transition from coal. And that is why a lot of conversation right now with various stakeholders within these regions, and I know it for a fact because we as Capitalism are working right now in 6 different countries, and if I remember correctly, 17 different regions, helping them to understand what it really means, and to make sure that this transition from coal is as painless as possible, and also to some extent to create the opportunity, because closing the mining as scary as it feels right now creates also the opportunity, especially with all the funding that comes behind the European Green Deal, and hopefully also from our local sources. And it will mean lots of opportunities around digital innovation, open data, and everything that comes with it. So lots needs to be done by the governments and also by the different stakeholders around the upskilling, around really looking what will the new workforce needs to look like, and how we need to take what young people, but also how to effectively re-educate and upskill the workforce. I would really, you ask about the companies and the unicorns and how it looks like right now. And my thinking is that I working when I work and advising our clients on a regular basis, I really see the needle moving right now. And it's whenever we have an M&A transaction, someone is selling something, and there are potential buyers. We do talk about the ESG, and the professor was very right. It's not only about the E, it's also very much about S, and so much about the G. So once we're having the conversations right now with a potential buyer, for example, there is valuation, there is the whole due diligence process around the ESG, and trust me, if we have a potential seller, the seller who is not able to have a proper conversation with potential buyer about their ESG strategy going forward, it is a very big risk issue. So this is something that definitely is changing the way how we are looking at the company, how we evaluate them, and more I'm seeing this ESG part as a very great opportunity, not only as a statistic and a reporting requirement that we and I think it will continue this way.
Okay, Agnieszka, thank you so much. And I want to see as Emerging Europe has created and brought us all together, I wonder, Jin Young Kim, if I could ask you a question to you, how much is Southeast Asia genuinely looking at the Emerging Europe part of the world in terms of business and in terms of conversation and in terms of sharing ideas and hopefully sharing platforms and ideas for bringing a cohesive ESG understanding. Is this something that you're increasingly seeing when it comes to the companies that you're talking to?
K.E.Y의 글로벌 어떤 그 비즈니스 파트너는 또 비즈니스가 좀 나가 있는 지역은 동남아 쪽으로 많이 나가 있습니다. 아시아에 국한되어 있고 IB 관련해서 뉴욕이나 런던에 이제 저희 그 지점이 나가 있는데 이 한국만 해도 한국은 그 수출 위주의 산업을 갖고 있습니다. 그 수출 위주의 산업을 갖게 된 것은 그 낮은 인건비가 있는 그러니까 생산 원가가 낮은 그 동남아 지역으로 공장 제조 시설을 이전하고 이제 그걸 받아서 저희가 수출을 통해서 이제 수익을 창출하는 이런 구조였는데 팬데믹 이후에 그 아마 리쇼링이 굉장히 이슈가 되고 있는 것 같아요. 그래서 그 환경 친화적인 어떤 시설을 갖추고 있는 이머징 유럽이라든가 유럽에 직접 바로 그 이제 제품을 판매할 수 있도록 하는데 좀 더 친환경적인 제조 시설을 갖고 있는 이머징 유럽에 대한 관심도는 당연히 높을 수밖에 없을 것 같고요. 그쪽으로 진출하려는 한국의 기업에 대한 투자라든가 이런 거는 적극적으로 검토할 예정입니다. 다만 이런 어떤 이머징 유럽이나 아시아나 다 비슷한 문제를 갖고 있을 텐데 투명한 정보, 경영 정보를 과연 그러니까 비재무 정보를 공개할 수 있느냐는 또 다른 문제인 것 같습니다. 예를 들어서 재무 정보는 저희들이 그 투자를 할 때 예를 들어서 사업 보고서나 이런 걸 보면서 알 수 있지만 비재무 정보는 그 기업이 공개하지 않으면 저희가 알 수 있는 방법이 사실 없거든요. 예를 들어서 유럽이 지금 어떤 상황인지 저도 잘 모르겠습니다. 유럽이 어떤 상황인지 모르겠지만 그런 비재무 정보도 투명하게 공시되고 많은 자료를 저희들이 서로 볼 수 있다면 마찬가지로 저희의 자료도 마찬가지겠지만 그러면 좀 더 많은 투자가 이루어지지 않을까 그런 생각을 좀 해봤습니다. 그리고 또 하나 이제 지금 오늘 재밌는 이제 되게 좋은 시간인데요. 저희 회사의 가장 큰 고민은 ESG 중에서도 젠더 문제입니다. 저희는 아시아권에만 공통된 저희가 글로벌 평가 기관으로부터 평가를 받아보면 거의 최하 수준입니다. 그러니까 의식적으로라도 여성의 비율을 높여야 되는 지금 그거를 지금 저희들이 되게 고민하고 있고 아직도 ESG 갈 길이 아까 멀다고 생각하고 사실 아까 교수님께서 한국의 지배구조 좋은 회사 어디냐고 했는데 없다고 하셨는데 굉장히 서운하고 K.E.Y가 좀 지배구조는 잘 되어 있는데 이런 더 좋은 회사로 가려면 이런 젠더 문제라든가 이 사회 내에 최고 의사결정 기구 안에 어떤 여성의 비율을 더 높이는 그런 일들을 좀 하면 나중에 저희들도 자신 있게 K.E.Y가 지배구조가 가장 좋은 회사라고 말씀드릴 것 같습니다.
Fascinating. I have to say it's wonderful to hear you talk about gender equality as well. It's something that was touched upon by President Biden in his first Congress address, and it's something that I'm very pleased to hear that you're picking up on as well, because we've got half of the population as a workforce, and so it's important that they get paid equally. We are running out of time, so before we, as Agnieszka said, we do need a whole another day of conference to talk about so many fascinating topics. For the time being, I want to thank my esteemed panel of experts. Agnieszka Gajewska from PwC, Jeffrey Liebert from Gazelle Finance, Jin Kim from K.E.Y Financial Group, and Professor Kyo-Sang Lee, who very kindly started us off and kicked us off on this fascinating discussion about building back better together and applying ESG frameworks for international trade and investment. Thank you so much all, and Andrew and the team at Emerging Europe, thank you so much for facilitating this conference, and I hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Kasia. It was great to hear all of you in different parts of the world. Today, I was really interested in that part related to standardization, especially when it comes to cultural differences and the level of development. Now, last year I had the pleasure of joining one of the sessions at the K.E.Y platform conference online, and we were expecting that this year we would be able to actually meet offline. Unfortunately, the situation is slightly different. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed a lot of different challenges, showed a lot of different challenges, and exposed the healthcare system's shortcomings and vulnerabilities in a number of different geographies. Maintaining and restoring health while minimizing negative impacts on the environment and leveraging opportunities to improve it is a clear post-COVID goal. In the next session, we're going to discuss the future of healthcare and how it can benefit from AI, from big data and other technologies, and how the Asian Tigers and emerging Europe can join forces to contribute to the global healthcare and health tech scene. The next session will be moderated by Samuel Burke, a CNN technology correspondent and a news presenter. He will be joined by experts from EIT Health InnoStars, Taiwan AI Labs, Health Tech Lab Serbia, and the Hallam University Medical School. Sam, are you already with us? If yes, over to you.
Andrew, I hear you. Hey Andrew, very good morning from London. Very excited to connect like this once again. It's been an incredible time for those of us covering these events, but especially to contrast what's happening between Asia and Europe, between emerging Europe. The successes that Asia has had, many of us are envious of, but we're looking for ways now so that we can collaborate with each other. So, Andrew, am I ready to take it away?
Yes, go for it.
All right, well, I would like to start right away by getting to the guests that we've had and start to talk about some of the questions that we've already been receiving, but also to open it up to you, our audience. At any point today, you can send your questions and I'll be answering them and having our panel answer them. I want to start by introducing everybody. Right now, we'll go through and start with Balazs Fourier from InnoStars. He's the Director, EIT Health InnoStars. We also have Ji-Sung Chung, a professor from the Hallam University Medical School, and Ethan Tu, the founder of AI Labs, and lastly, Tamas Bekasi, RIS Business Creation Manager at EIT Health InnoStars. So I just want to let you guys know exactly what the format is here. Feel free to interrupt each other. Let's keep it just like a conversation would be in real life. No need for all the pleasantries. I want to start by asking, what are the biggest health takeaways thus far? I mean, it's been a very interesting time. There's lots of we've learned. You can say somewhat obvious about telemedicine, but I'm interested in terms of big data, in terms of AI. What are some of the biggest takeaways? Tamas, I want to start with you.
Hi everyone, nice to be here. So yeah, whenever we're talking about telemedicine or AI or any type of big data-driven solutions, these are, first of all, these are not new. So whenever we are talking about, and it's really hard to tell something positive about COVID, but if we want, of course, we can highlight the fact that healthcare innovation and healthcare itself became a more popular topic within the societies than ever. So that's a little bit triggering how not just the society, but also healthcare institutes are reacting for new healthcare innovation. Because right now, of course, continent by continent, it's a little bit different, but we are living in an era where we have tons of actually innovations also coming from healthcare, but on the other side, institutes just partially utilize these kind of innovations. And this kind of fluctuation from the creation of innovation and using the innovation is a little bit more highlighted in this kind of COVID era. So personally, and also at the health, we are expecting a new golden era for healthcare innovation from now on. But of course, which is always appearing as a risk in every type of golden eras, also from the investment point of view, we need to be careful with too much optimism. So we need to highly evaluate all the kind of healthcare innovation projects in order to reserve this kind of golden era for a long time, because that's what we needed.
Can you give me a little specifics about what you mean too much optimism? Is there a specific area? I mean, here in the UK, I can say, even though it was very successful in Asia, contact tracing just really didn't work, nor did it work in the United States. So that's one obvious one to me. Something less obvious, can you drill down on that a bit for me?
Yes, so just as a general background, so of course Europe, compared to Asia or compared to the US, from investment point of view, I mean the volumes and also from the time to market perspective, it's still a little bit slow. But if we are just thinking back, so we all remember the story coming from the US, how the optimism or any type of reliability towards biotech products actually drill down because of the fact we all know. So actually, what it's made a fallback from the investment intention, because of course in many cases investors became less optimistic or less kind of trustful towards these kind of projects. And now because of COVID and now because of the healthcare innovation golden era, investors after just a short period of time when they become a little bit more conservative, they start to open wide towards these kind of projects. And whenever I'm saying too much optimism, it's meaning that now investors see a big potential in healthcare innovation, and sometimes they don't have the background to evaluate or measure these kind of projects on a professional level. Therefore, they're investing a lot. And if they found these kind of investments kind of fail at the end, then it can make another fallback, like we sensed in case of terrorists. So we need to be careful. Also, investors should, in my view, involve professional institutes in the measurements and evaluation of these kind of projects. And of course, we much more than enjoy to have more investments within Europe for healthcare innovation, because at the end of the day, this can really accelerate these projects to the market. So we need to be careful with our optimism, but the good news is that we can sense optimism from the investor side.
That puts it into context. Thank you for that, Tomas. Ivan, I want to welcome you to the conversation. I'm interested, what are some of your key takeaways about the future of medicine now and the future of technology in medicine in the context of the pandemic?
Thank you so much. Good morning from Belgrade first. And I would like to say that the vaccines are the solution, but they're not enough, and we have discovered that. So there are plenty of time and efforts that have been done before the vaccines appeared, and I would like to stress on the community and everything and the involvement of everyone from the community. I can talk about our own example from Serbia and Health Tech Lab ecosystem, where all the engineers, designers, doctors were involved in producing solutions in order to save lives until the actual vaccine arrived. In terms of multiple hardware and software solutions, in terms of...
Tell us about them. I'm interested to hear. You can go into some detail right away.
Definitely, yes. So there were multiple respirators that were actually hands-on produced in Serbian ecosystem. There were several instruments that were actually clearing up the air in hospital areas and then in codes. And there were several actually solutions, apps that were actually detecting or calculating people that were, let's say, more than 10 gathered in certain place. So actually the transmission would be avoided and so on. And we're very, very proud about all of the solutions. Innovation Fund also funded around 12 different solutions that were actually implemented during the quarantine and so on. So we are actually very happy to see that there is actually this kind of empathy, and where people even from different kind of technologies that were not focused on health tech were in that time refocusing on health tech and actually assisting in these moments. So this is also another takeaway that besides the community, the empathy and inclusion, it's really crucial. And I think we've showed good results in our own community, and I would say also worldwide.
And of course, while so much of the media attention has been on places like the UK, like the US, which have advanced so quickly with the vaccine, there are so many countries where the vaccine is really a 2022 at best story. I want to go down to Jisak Chon. You're the professor joining us now on stage, and I want to get your sense of what some of the biggest takeaways are over a year into this pandemic.
네, 감사합니다. 여러분들 만나서 반갑고요. 저희가 초기에는 한국이 대단히 방역에 성공을 했는데 가장 큰 요인은 저희가 2015년도에 이 코비드-19하고 유사한 질병을 우리나라에서 유행하는 것을 보고 철저히 준비를 했던 것이죠. 2015년도에 머스가 생겼습니다. 미들 이스트 레스피레이터리 신드롬 환자가 와서 몇 환자가 사망하고 병원이 갑자기 마비 상태에 사회가 다 스톱이 됐습니다. 그 당시에 한국 돈으로 거의 12조 정도에 해당하는 경제적인 손실이 있었다고 그래서 그 이후에 이 준비를 굉장히 철저히 하는 과정에서 제가 이제 호흡기내과 전문의로서 감염병 폐렴을 전공하면서 대한민국 질병관리본부의 본부장으로 들어가서 준비한 일을 하게 됐습니다. 그때 가장 역점을 뒀던 것은 역학조사입니다. 그러니까 트레이싱이라는 우리가 멀을 때 잘 못했던 것은 개인정보 보호 때문에 제대로 된 추적을 할 수가 없었는데 멀을 때문에 사회가 몇 달 동안 마비가 되고 난다는 것은 굉장히 완전히 스탑했죠. 그 이후에는 개인의 정보보다 국가의 경제, 국익이 더 우선이 되는구나 라는 개념들을 대한민국 국민들이 갖게 됐죠. 그래서 그 이후에는 사람들이 어떤 병을 퍼뜨린다고 어떤 감염의 소스가 있다고 생각했을 때 추적을 자유롭게 할 수 있게 됐습니다. 제가 질병관리본부장을 하는 동안에도 1년에 한 200명 정도의 그 당시 아직도 멀스가 유행을 하고 있었습니다. 소위 그 환자들이 의심되는 환자들이 입국을 했고 그 입국을 하고 나면 그 환자들을 찾아서 역학조사를 하는 것입니다. 테스트를 하고 트레이싱을 하고 필요한 트레이닝을 하고 그 과정에서 한국 질병관리본부는 어떤 노하우를 많이 얻었냐면 환자들을 찾아가서 역학조사하기 위해서는 접촉자를 조사하는데 접촉자를 조사했을 때 진실을 얘기하지 않습니다. 그래서 그분들이 누구를 만나고 어디에 있는지를 알기 위해서 기본적으로 신용카드, 크레딧 카드를 사용합니다. 추적을 합니다. 그 다음에 대한민국의 거의 대부분이 모바일 폰을 갖고 있기 때문에 GPS 시스템을 이용해서 모바일 폰을 어디에 움직였는지 그거를 추적합니다. 그 다음에 많은 사람들이 교통카드를 갖고 있기 때문에 교통카드를 가지고 어디에 움직였는지 추적합니다. 그 다음 마지막에는 CCTV를 가지고 어디에 갔는지 추적합니다. 그래서 그런 훈련들을 굉장히 오랫동안 했었거든요. 그래서 그런 것 때문에 저희가 이제 상당히 좀 준비가 된 상태에서 지난 1년간을 맞았다 이렇게 보는 말씀드립니다.
Well, I want to use that as a bouncing off point for the next question. Ethan, I'll be interested to get your perspective, but I just want to pick up and ask the professor another question. Was that information gathered with people's permission, or was it government powers that allowed you to collect that information?
I think in Taiwan, because we have experience on SARS in 2003, so I think that at the very, very beginning, very early, like January last year, so in Taiwan we had the CECC, it's like a command center to control all the information on the execution here, that's the top level of execution in Taiwan.
But is it with people's permission, or is this type of data the government has access to anyway?
So we have a type of we have some type of data government will access, like the national health insurance data, including your your medical history and your if you come from foreign country, you also register in regular. So in Taiwan, we have an authority that in executing them can connect all the information in order to trace the contact history. But at the same time in Taiwan, because we are Taiwan Island, we also develop a decentralized approach in order to, for everyone, they keep tracing their own content history, stored in their own device, which means if there's a confirmed case happen, then we can use we can let the decentralized way to broadcast the device ever be close to them. So we developed the content social distance act last April and have a beta release at that time. And it becomes an open source technique for the government that equal to all the institutes in Taiwan. They can leverage this open source content history infrastructure in order to trace the content history. So it's similar to like now we can see Apple and Google, they have the infrastructure, leverage the Bluetooth device to trace the content. But in Taiwan, we developed this app in last February, then we deploy it in April. So we do it at the very beginning. And also in the NHI, National Health Insurance Agency, we deployed the system, we call this COVID-19 chest X-ray classifier. So in Taiwan, because all the hospitals, they file the insurance claim for the chest X-ray, it will file the medical imaging to the NHI, National Health Insurance. And then we put the AI classifier in this health insurance agency. So all the chest X-ray result filed to the National Health Insurance Agency, it will run through this AI algorithm. Then if in this algorithm we detect there's a COVID-19 possibility, it will notify the CDC in Taiwan to trace this record. So through last January to last March, out of 109 confirmed cases, we actually can detect the COVID-19 before the PCR test, because at that time the PCR test was not available at the location.
Tomas, I'm interested. You're listening to what the professor and what Ethan just said, and Yvonne, I'll be posing this to you next, but Tomas, to start with you, we're hearing what our Asian colleagues are saying. The centralized system, certainly we have a lot of that here in Europe, including in emerging Europe, certainly more than the United States, where I come from, where it's completely decentralized. So chest X-rays that Ethan is talking about, for instance, I don't think that any certainly before a pandemic would somebody be tracking them. Are these models that we see in Asia that our colleagues are talking about here, are they really applicable in places like the emerging European countries? When you talk about big data, I think certainly there's a bigger drive toward privacy here than there is in the Asian countries. So how much can we really take from what they're saying and apply it here, given the different social norms and different government norms that we see between our two regions?
Yes, it's really the matter of price-value ratio. So definitely this kind of centralized, so of course it has many benefits, but fortunately or unfortunately, it's up to how we see it from the European culture and societies are not really capable to be part of this kind of centralized system. Of course, step by step we can achieve it, but that's important that we should draw somewhere the line, because definitely whenever we are talking about the reaction of pandemic, this kind of centralized operation is really helping. So that's a huge help. In other cases, because we all know that implementing this kind of system is not just about taking care of emergency, because if you're just talking about this, definitely it's a huge benefit. So it's a big question that how can we make a balance between the centralized and, let's say, emergency focused system, because definitely personally I would really encourage this kind of implementation in Europe or also in the US. But I truly believe that between the two kind of setup, there is a middle way, and it's starting with the harmonization and synchronization of the accessibility of data. So whenever we are talking about Europe and the European reaction on any type of emergencies like the pandemic, and also whenever we are talking about how AI can help in the healthcare systems, we need to have a much more unified data sets than what we have right now. Because if we are just focusing on Europe, emerging Europe, we definitely have issues with them. We have, like GDPR, we have some central regulation which can help us in the further steps. But still, we don't have the data pool, the unified data sets between countries, which can be utilized for further innovation and further cooperation in the reaction of emergencies and pandemic handling. So that's something we definitely need to do. And of course, we need to identify what could be the further steps in order to make a little bit more centralized operation. But again, I truly believe that we should find and we should actually choose the middle way between those kind of two systems what we are living in right now.
In just a short follow-up, I'm going to ask Tomas and then Ivana the same question. But Tomas, just because you've been talking, I'll start with you. If you had to put us on a scale 1 to 10 of where we are with technology and healthcare, if you had to put Asia, and I'm talking about countries like Korea, like Taiwan, which we know have done so well, and then places like the emerging European countries, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most technology, where would you put Asia? 1 being the least, where would you put us in Europe?
Wow, it's a tricky question. So I believe that Asia is somewhere 8, so 7 and 8, and Europe. So, and again, it's a tricky question. Let me give you just a quick footer before I place Europe on the scale, because availability of technology is somewhere close to the 7 in case of Europe. The utilization of technology, now that's a little bit lower than that. So I would place like 6 or 5, 6. So definitely the preparedness on the technological scale, we have a lower rank in my view compared to Asia. But this is mainly coming from the utilization of these kind of innovations.
I'm surprised that you actually put it at a 6. I was expecting you to say a lower number. Ivana, I want to ask you the same question. You look at all these countries so closely and the technology. Do you agree with Tomas? And if you disagree, no problem at all. Where would you rate our Asian colleagues, and where would you rate us here in Europe?
Yes, okay, I can start with ranking. Definitely, there is a difference between EU and emerging Europe. But I would say, and I would maybe put 9 for Asian countries and maybe 7 for emerging Europe. So Serbian government is definitely doing a lot of efforts and put as a priority digitalization and implementation of all the emerging technologies, and we truly hope that we will get to Asia to cooperate at the same level. But at the moment, I can say that it's crucial actually to start with events like this, where we can learn from each other, where we can see their experience. As they already mentioned, they had multiple epidemics, and the system is well organized, and we can definitely learn from them, from Asian countries, and then from probably other good experiences all over the world that showed us that during this pandemic. And talking about that, I would like to mention that we work together with Data Science Conference and Cleveland Clinic. We will organize international conference, the 24th, 26th of August this year, to actually discuss all the experiences, learnings, and actually talking about health tech towards 2030. So I guess it will be very interesting to hear in more details experiences from all over the world, specifically from the US, Asia, and Europe.
Ivana, I want to pick up on a nuance that Tomas mentioned. He talked about technology availability in emerging Europe versus technology implementation. When you hear about all the technology, and again, we have to keep in mind the social norms and differences in terms of privacy expectations. Do you think that everybody in emerging Europe was given on a silver platter the technology that Ethan, that our colleague, the professor was talking about? Do you think that we would be able to apply them here in Europe? I mean, I'm talking about broader Europe because almost all of us, even here still in the UK after Brexit, are we have to go by GDPR. Even if technology available to us for free, do you think that we would implement them here in Europe?
I truly hope so. In Serbia, I believe we're on a good way. In the region of the Western Balkans, I think there is still a long time to go and to get there. And this is why it's important to actually learn and see, set a direction actually where to go and what are the next steps in order to actually gather the privacy issues, the technological knowledge, the experiences, because it's not just one thing. Technology is there, but implementing them, implementing it actually takes a lot more, especially actually communication with the community, with the patients and citizens. So just putting also regulatory part aside, implementation to probably also take a while, and we see that with vaccination, we see that with other technologies that are already there and that could be used, but there is always this kind of gap we need to work on.
Jordan, do you think there would be social resistance? I mean, there is some resistance to the vaccine in the United States. You see it in many communities of color. You see it in a lot of white Republicans, white older male Republicans who are supporters of Donald Trump. They're actually the community that's the most resistant to the vaccine. But when we're talking about resistance to technology, Amanda, do you think that people where you are would have resistance to some of these tools? Tracking, for instance, we heard Ethan and the professor talking about tracking people's Metro cards, tracking, for instance, their credit card information. Do you think there would be, or has there been resistance where you are to these types of measures from the government?
It depends, I guess. I cannot answer to that yes or no, but I can say that ethics of technology is another important issue. And by including patients and citizens in all these discussions, it will probably melt away all the doubts, and it will probably put their input and actually putting targets and design criteria of what citizens expect. So in which cases they would actually use those technologies and where they would be fine with it. I'm sure there is a way, but I think all the linkages need to sit at one table and make a final decision for implementation of any technology, whether we're talking about vaccines or any other mode of technology.
Maybe I'm going to cross back over to our colleagues in Asia. And Professor, you talked about, for example, the ways that information is centralized, how you're able to track. But in terms of big technology, in terms of AI, in terms of big data, how was that implemented, Professor, where you were during the pandemic in ways that we hadn't seen before? This question is for G-Sub John.
You're going to do that? I'm gonna adopt.
저희가 사실 제일 아쉬운 부분이 데이터와 AI를
we adopt, right?
많은 사람들이 이 데이터에 하고 있지만 실제로 이번 팬데믹에서는
I don't wanna spend money on dogs. Like they said
이것은 정부가 모든 우리나라에서 800만 명 넘게 확진자가 수용하는 나왔는데 이 데이터를 다 축적을 해서 좀더 환자의 역학을 파악하기 증명에 들어가고 또 언제쯤 백신이 들어가야 되고 어떻게 치료해야 되고 등등 이런 것들에 대한 파악이 됐을 것 같은데 아쉽게도 지금 이 방역을 담당하고 있는 기관에서 빅데이터를 만들 수 있을 정도 그거를 기획하고 진행할 수 있을 정도이거든요. 그래서 저는 이 기회에 이런 것들이 필요하고 대한민국은 대만과 마찬가지로 전 국민이 국민건강보험에 들어있기 때문에 모든 국민들의 하나하나의 건강기록을 다 갖고 있어요. 그리고 그것을 암호화시켜서 일단 다 풀어낼 수 있는 이번 기회에 빅데이터를 이런 팬데믹 때 활용하는 것을 적극적으로 활용하고 싶습니다.
Why do you think that was, Professor? Why do you think that given your experience, for instance, that you mentioned earlier with MERS, given how advanced that we perceive you in the rest of the world because you've done so much better than those of us in the West, in Europe, in the United States. Why do you think that the Central Powers didn't have that mind power, the way you describe it, that they didn't have the tools for the time to do that? Was it just simply that that methodology is not in place, and will it be in place for the next pandemic?
사실 한국은 전체 의료를 맡고 있는 한 10% 정도가 공공의료거든요. 나머지는 민간에서 합니다. 이 각 민간 병원들의 소위 커먼 데이터베이스가 완전하게 통일되어 있습니다. 그런 거로 해서 그걸 또 새로 만들어야 되는 그런 문제가 있습니다. 아마 이걸 계기로 저희가 커먼 데이터 웨어하우스를 만든다는 그런 식으로 해서 진행할 수 있을 거라고 보고 있습니다.
Ethan, I want to jump over to you and your experience. The same question, and picking up where the professor left off. I'm interested, what technology was used this time? We hear about the missed opportunities in Korea, places like Taiwan. What were the successes of using big technology? Was there big success with AI? Was there big success with some of the big data tools that you have at your hands?
I think we were very lucky because at the very beginning when the pandemic happened, at that time we are collaborating with Taiwan CDC malaria automated detection. So at that time we already have a platform set up in the CDC, and we also have a platform set up in NHI. Therefore, when we respond to the pandemic, we can quickly implement the methodology and work together with CDC and the NHI to put together the solutions. So for example, not only the chest X-ray system, we also deployed another system that actually every one of 5 confirmed cases, we have virus sequencing of the patient. So because we have the virus sequencing, we can actually trace the transmission of the virus. So these cases infected from which cases, it becomes an open and clear approach that everyone can trace their cases because we add to we leverage the big data, we leverage the system created to the pandemic very early, so we can have a more detailed methodology applied to the data, like genome sequencing, then leverage the genome sequencing to trace the transmission of the virus. And later on, not only the centralized data we leverage, we actually collaborate, we call it federated learning alliance. That is actually an alliance across 80 medical centers in Taiwan, which means not only the centralized database, NHI, we have hundreds of video medical records we have, but also we use a decentralized approach. If you look into like the way we do our machine learning technology, we actually respect the GDPR and we respect the privacy integrity because we leverage instead of we pull all the data together into a centralized database in NHI, we now actually leverage the same protocol. So the data will stay in original hospital or the data will stay in their original personal device. But we put the same protocol to do the machine learning training. So in this case, we actually help to make our AI algorithm more robust over the time because all the hospitals, when they apply this AI algorithm, we actually train the data inside their hospital. The NHI don't need to pull their data out of the hospital, but it actually make the algorithm better and better. Then we aggregate the algorithm together to become the best algorithm cross hospital. So I think we are very lucky because we had this Open AI Research Institute fund in 2017. Then we collaborate with all the member centers in Taiwan and put together this AI algorithm with the CDC and NHI. And before 2020, and at the time the pandemic happened, then we can certainly leverage our infrastructure to use this pandemic.
Obviously.
Okay, so Mas, I know you want to jump in, so I'll let you just jump in to add on to what some of you what he's going to say.
Yeah, just one thing I would like to mention here, that actually you use the example of white Republicans, so I just want to highlight the importance of education. So that's also a factor we need to be really careful with, because we reach the era, again, I'm using the word era, when we have so much innovation, so much technological, new solutions that unfortunately sometimes societies, even professionals, cannot deal with. So actually they cannot keep up with these new changes, what we have in our innovation culture. Therefore it's really, really important now to little bit balance between the readiness of the professionals and the society and the available innovation. Because whenever we are talking about emerging Europe or the entire European region, we are also facing with the issue that most of our innovation, healthcare innovations, are not getting to the market because of the lack of knowledge or lack of competence, but the lack of entrepreneurship and lack of entrepreneurial skills. So we are not there. So this is why I used, the ranking of 6, 7 in case of Europe or emerging Europe, because all the innovation capabilities are here, but we are not good at the moment in how to drive them to the market and how to think of a global scale.
Tomas, can you give me a tangible example of that, of a technology that should have been available, that was available, but because of the gap you're describing, just didn't make it to the market?
It happens actually hundreds, thousands times actually per year. So because if you see that there is a CIMIC scale. So when, for instance, the CIMIC methodology is a really, really good, let's say, overview how this kind of difference is coming from the project. So usually we are talking about, also if we are just coming out from CIMIC and thinking of technology readiness level, almost in all cases the technology readiness level of each project are higher than the readiness of their business competence. Usually teams are coming from the ideation phase, so new technology innovators are coming with a team of researchers, doctors, but there is no business capability in the team. So this is why, for instance, the IT House is also working year by year to accelerate hundreds of startups, to give them mostly, of course, not just business competences and knowledge, but mostly this kind of knowledge, teach them how to create actually a business from a research project, because that's sometimes a serious misunderstanding in young innovators, that they think about a research project. And unfortunately, and this is where the government and EU can come to the picture, because of course they can fund these research projects and early stage projects, because unfortunately most of the cases investors will not do that, because it's not attractive enough at that moment to have an investment. So this is where the government and the EU has a really significant role, but also they have a significant role to educate people how to make business from their projects. So I can actually give you unfortunately, again, up to how to say it, that we can give you hundreds of examples like this.
I must say that Capitalism is probably the best example, because in the Western Balkans region, this is actually the case. So we have huge technological background, but really the lack of funding opportunities, and that's even less than the EU, and then also the business knowledge, and actually this is why we created Capitalism, to attract funding, to attract the ecosystem that can support development of innovation.
Ivana, I'm interested, and I'll bounce back to Tomas after this for the same question. Where do you see, we're here to talk about the relationship, what countries in emerging Europe can take from Asia, what Asia can take from emerging Europe. Ivana, where do you see the most amount of technology innovation? Of course, I'm sure you see it right in your own backyard, so we'll say that's number one. But then number two, where are the real centers of health technology growth? Not necessarily what governments are adopting them the most, but where do you see the real innovation happening?
I must say there are several places, but I would probably be now to Israel. They're startup nation, so probably it's not only health, but we can see from the results of this pandemic as well that they're really leading this situation at the moment, and it's definitely based on innovations and startups. So definitely Israel, and I would say actually innovations are happening now all over the world, but probably they're not seen as equal in all places.
And of course, that's one of the reasons that Pfizer chose Israel for their vaccination program, because it's a small country, has a centralized system, and of course, hold on 1 second, I want to make sure my computer doesn't restart, okay? That can happen live in these conferences. And of course, the ability to use their startups to make sure they can track all this. Tomas, of course, I was expecting to hear Israel on the list. What other places, what other regions, where in Asia also do you see the most amount of innovation? You can name
أنا هون أنا ما نسيت البث بس جالسة عم اسمع شو جالسين عم يقولوا. والله تعبت بدالك يا ميسو. ياس بس عنا الكونفرنس كثير مهم كثير أشياء مفيدة، لهيك لازم نسمع ياس. وأنتم كمان استفيدوا.
We are also having like relationship with China, and in my belief we can learn a lot from each other. So first of all, of course, best practices is kind of standards, of course, but we should be open for each other, because especially these kind of global challenges like the pandemic, we need to share the best practices with each other. Also, whenever, for instance, Europe is ready to harmonize the data set, of course, we are talking about anonymized or pseudo-anonymized data. I would believe that we can also share the data sets between the continents, because that can really accelerate the innovation and also the solutions for these kind of big challenges. So I believe that we are the right track. And again, it's very hard to say something positive about this pandemic, but fortunately, more and more professionals and decision makers are aware how this kind of cooperation is important between the countries and between the continents.
And that, of course, is a silver lining. We have just a few minutes left, so I want to cross back over to Asia. And Ethan, really, it's a similar question, though I'm wondering if the answer is different. The technologies that you're implementing, are they mostly Taiwanese technologies? Where are the major sources of innovation that you're adopting there? Where are they coming from?
I think at this moment, all the AI innovation is global innovation. For example, the chest X-ray task file, we actually train the very beginning data out of the global open data. Then we innovate we make it better in Taiwan with the centralized database and also the federated database in Taiwan. So make it better, and then we put together the task file in an extract. So I think the innovation is right now is not isolated from Taiwan from others. We work together with the global. So we learn from the global, and we also make it better in Taiwan. But after we make better with Taiwan, because we are Taiwan Airline, we are open air research institute. We also welcome the global partner work with us and take our solution back to other country and see what will happen and what will apply.
We have just about a minute left, Professor Ji-Sung Chon, so I want to go over to you. Where is the major innovation happening? Of course, we know in Korea. Would you say the majority of the innovation comes from Korea? What other places as well are you adopting this technology? Just 1 minute, Professor.
대해서 제가 중심을 공개하는데 저는 이 기회에 한번 그 유럽에 제가 가끔 갈 때마다 느끼는 것은 각 나라마다 굉장히 혁신적인 생각들을 많이 갖고 있습니다. 제가 알고 있는 의학적인 분야에서. 근데 서로 협력하지는 않는 것 같아요. 그래서 저번에 이런 팬데믹이 우리가 다음에 또 올 거라고 누구나 다 예상을 그런 분야에서만이라도 어떤 네트워크를 만들어서 서로 좀 공유를 하고 특히 지금 우리가 인간이 생태계를 파괴하면서 1년에 적어도 5개의 새로운 감염들이 생겨나고 그런 것들을 병원체만이라도 정보로 서로 빨리 공유하는 그런 네트워크가 있다면 그것도 하나의 혁신이 아닐까.
Professor, thank you very much, and thank you to our other panelists. It's really interesting to see what we can learn from each other, which regions and continents have been able to make strides, and where we can come together. I want to thank each of the panelists for coming from two very different parts of the world, all here. Andrew, I want to go back to you, and I have to say it's really fascinating for me because, you know, at my time at CNN and in the coverage that I do now, what so much of it is talking to businesses. And what I heard here is that the same challenges that any company, I mean, I've interviewed huge mobile network operators, and their big challenges are centralizing data practices across their smaller companies, and that's the same type of issue that we're hearing here, that's what we need, centralized information, big database. So it looks like this is a problem that can be solved between business and government and coming together, which is of course what this conference is all about, Andrew.
Yes, we need to be prepared for another pandemic in case it comes in the future. Thank you very much, Sam, for this session, and a huge thank you for participating to all the experts, and it was great listening to all of you. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit fast forward on a number of trends, from e-commerce to workplace and city planning. In the next session, we will speak about how this short-term chaos resulting from the pandemic can bring long-term transformation and help plan and build efficient infrastructure to improve transport links, and what role technology, innovation, and sustainability will play in shaping the future of our cities. The next session will be moderated by Craig Turk, Editor-in-Chief at Emerging Europe. He will be joined by experts from the International Finance Corporation, WWF, and KDHC. Craig, over to you. I can see Craig is already with us.
Thank you, Andrew. Just waiting for panelists to join me. Thomas joining now, and there's Sergio. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. Well, welcome to this, which is our final discussion today. But I can say it's certainly not the least, and I'm certain that it will be a fascinating, insightful look at how the emerging Europe region can take on board some of the experience of the Asian Tigers career in particular when it comes to improving infrastructure, which I think we can all agree is in most parts of the emerging Europe region one of the main factors impacting the region's ability to really make the most of its potential. But as well as looking at infrastructure as a means of boosting trade and communication and so on, we also need to look at it in the wider context of climate change and how we can create sustainable infrastructure. And I think the first thing that we need to do is perhaps define exactly what sustainable infrastructure actually means. And then, we're going to move on a little bit to look at how we can, make it happen, factors need to be involved, and how technology can shape it. So as Andrew said, my name is Craig Turk. I'm the editor of Emerging Europe, and fortunately, I'm delighted to say that I've been joined by a wonderful group of well-qualified guests who will help me chew over some of these issues. Thomas Lubeck is with us from the International Finance Corporation. He's in Asia Pacific now, but I know that he has experience in Emerging Europe, particularly in the Western Balkans and Caucasus. Sergio Shidov is with us. He's from the WWF. And again, he's now based in Asia and Singapore, but he also has experience in the Emerging Europe region. And also Ki-Jun Kang, who is the General Manager of the Global Business Department at the Korean District Heating Corporation. So let's kick off. And I think that, returning to what I said in my introduction, I think that the probably the most crucial pertinent question is how do we define what sustainable infrastructure is. Is it more than railways instead of roads? Is it more than solar panels instead of gas boilers in our homes? Or is it actually that simple? This is something that I think we should talk about. So Sergio, I'll come to you first, because I know that you have some thoughts on this. So how do you see it, not least when it comes to integrating biodiversity conservation into infrastructure development, particularly through what I believe is called nature-based solutions and natural infrastructure. Sergio?
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation. As Craig mentioned, I work for government Singapore office, although slightly remotely now. And with respect to infrastructure, we have a commitment to shift the way infrastructure is built and operated by 2030, so that 100% of all infrastructure development integrates science-based and inclusive planning, nature climate risk, mitigation and student analysis, and applicable nature-based solutions. So I guess in a way I give you first on a flavor of how we might go and tackle the issues with infrastructure. It's a very difficult topic to find. Every project is different from one another and across geographies and mainly different things for different stakeholders, whether you're an investor or a project developer, and emphasis maybe on different elements to find out across the project infrastructure cycle. I think what's really important to highlight is the opportunity that we have now to think about in respect of infrastructure such as transport units. How is that going to look like over the next 50, 100 years? We know that infrastructure has extremely long lifespans, up to 100 years. So what we construct now will determine whether we reach, for example, global climate goals or biodiversity goals that we set in the way of MSF. So from this point of view, it provides a way, a direction to tackle the definition of infrastructure. It needs to be low carbon. There's no other way. All the infrastructure that is being planned to build now, it needs to be net zero. And in fact, this is one of the criteria that we have in mind for the initiative that we work called Fast Infrastructure, which I can explain later. At the same time, I think it needs to incorporate both the traditional types, so from energy to public transport to building, water supply, sanitation, but also natural infrastructure, such as forests and landscapes, wetlands, and watershed protection. And quite often, we as government do a lot of work upstream. We recognize that a lot of the potential to influence how infrastructure is delivered is to influence the strategy, the planning, and the design phases. So the crucial questions to be asked when we assess infrastructure needs for the nation or region, whether nature can provide those services in the first place, or at the same time use a more systemic or alternative analysis. For example, if we look at transportation and you find building roads, you have to ecosystem. Can you address that issue by looking at the root causes of transportation issues? Congestion, for example. So I'll stop here for now. I think I've made a couple of points that we can explore. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Thomas, I saw you, nodding your head a few times there during what Sergio was saying. So I can turn to you next. As somebody who does, have extensive experience in emerging Europe, as I said, particularly in the Western Balkans and the Caucasus, but now obviously in Singapore, which is one of the most densely populated places in the world. Maybe a little bit about the differences, or perhaps even the similarities between the two regions.
Sure. So thanks very much, Craig. Perhaps I'll begin just by doing a little bit of introduction to set the context of where. As you mentioned, I'm the transaction advisory manager for PPPs covering all the countries of South Asia as well as East Asia Pacific, working at international finance corporations. So we've got about 25 mandates in countries, basically everything from Afghanistan all the way to Fiji and everything in between. trying to help find ways to attract private sector into areas such as power generation, health and education, affordable housing, and transport, of course. So, as you mentioned, I was previously based in Belgrade, where I was the regional manager for Central and Southeastern Europe, covering Western Balkans, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. I moved here to Singapore just last July, so this event actually is really welcome for me, because although I'm very excited and happy and getting engaged here in Asia, I'm still feeling very nostalgic and drawing upon the experiences that I've had in Europe. So I think most people know, but just very quickly, IFC is the member of the World Bank group that focuses on private sector development. When people think about the World Bank or World Bank group, usually they're thinking about this monolithic, large institution that focuses only on loans to government, when in fact there's 6 different entities within the group. And IFC, of course, is working with the private sector in order to try and increase shared prosperity and reduce extreme poverty. I was nodding with a lot of the things that Sergio was saying, because sustainability and ESG is at the core of what it is that we're doing in the World Bank group. And in fact, if you just look at recent history, particularly on the climate and the carbon piece that Sergio just mentioned, between 2016 and 2020, collectively as a group, we've invested $83 billion globally to finance climate initiatives in emerging markets. This is basically equivalent to about 34 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. So the story continues, and earlier this month, in the context of our spring meetings with our shareholder governments, the board approved a new climate action plan, which covered the wide swath of different things. I won't get into detail now, but we'll be increasing the amount of climate finance that our group is providing from 28% to 35%. We'll be doing far more diagnostics at the country level in order to try and map out where there may be opportunities for carbon upside, where countries might want to try to invest, and where their obligations are for the Paris Accords. With the Paris Accords themselves, we'll be increasing the amount of all of our projects, 85% that are in compliance, will be going up to 100% in the coming years. So I just want to break down and talk a little bit about the first question as well on sustainable infrastructure, and just kind of do it in a very straightforward way. So let's break it down. What is sustainable first? Right? Is it an investment, right? Or is it an action that consults and takes into account really long-term stakeholders? So things like even labor, right? Labor being treated fairly in the construction of the asset. Resource efficiency, making sure that emissions are acceptable levels for people as well as the environment. Are the communities, right, that are being affected in the area where the infrastructure is being built consulted and inclusive in that process? Big issue here in Asia is land acquisition and land settlement. You have people who, in the easiest cases, of course, it's the government who own the land, right? And then it can be tendered out in a PPP or transaction. You've got private landowners, but then you also have indigenous peoples commonly across different parts of Asia that have informal land rights and are making their livelihoods from the events. This is big issue. But also, to echo Sergio as well, biodiversity and cultural heritage as well. I remember vividly when World Bank was doing the East-West Highway in Georgia, around a little town called K.E.Y, when they were digging out the road, they stumbled upon the most miraculous sort of find of like a 6,000-year-old sort of grave site and types of cultural heritage objects. And the work stopped so that all of these things could be properly collected and documented. It takes time and money to do that, but these things also have to be part of what goes into the sustainable. As far as infrastructure, I think we know the obvious ones, the hard infrastructure like transport links, aviation, power generation. But increasingly from our side, we're thinking also about the soft infrastructure, right? Things that are really important like healthcare, stating the obvious in the COVID world. But also education, because this also is a very important resource for longer term as well. So maybe I'll stop there and we can better on the topic.
All right, thank you. I'm going to come to you, Ki-Jun Khan over there in Seoul now. You know, I know that Korea district heating is, you know, it's recognized as a, you know, a global leader in the efficient development of energy and air pollution control, which is, you know, an issue that, you know, is relevant obviously both to Seoul and to many of the cities in emerging Europe. And it's certainly interesting from an Eastern European perspective that Korea, which, you know, is obviously viewed as a, you know, a technology leader, you know, is using district heating. And I say that because in large parts of Eastern Europe, you know, district heating is kind of viewed as being a backwards technology because it's associated with the communist period. So, you know, I'd just like to, you know, ask you to tell us a little bit about, you know, the experience of Seoul and how, you know, the Korea district heating company is tackling the issues of, you know, ensuring that people, you know, can heat their homes, can, you know, have access to hot water and everything, but doing that in a sustainable way.
이제 말씀하신 거에 큰 흐름은 이제 기울어가는 거죠. 우리가 이제 지원 난방이 이제 한국에서 어떻게 발전했는지에 대한 질문을 주셨고요. 일단은 저는 지속 가능한 인프라라는 주제가 너무 느낌이 좋습니다. 일단은 저희 지역 난방이라는 회사 자체가 기후 변화 대응을 위해서 만든 회사입니다. 그래서 질문에 답변을 드리면 말씀하신 대로 지역 난방의 형태는 집단적인 에너지 공급 형태이기 때문에 약간 좀 유럽이라든가 아니면 좀 유럽이라든가 특히 원래 형태는 미국에서 시작을 했죠. 그렇게 해가지고 집단적인 도시의 난방을 도시적으로 가져가는 방식을 갖고 왔는데 실질적으로 한국에서 이걸 도입된 거는 저희가 80년도 초반부터 시작했습니다. 그거는 당연히 어떤 문제냐면 그 당시에 한국의 그 어떤 난방, 열 에너지 사용 형태하고 연관이 있습니다. 그때는 집집마다 그 연탄이라는 석탄 기반의 난방을 하고 있었기 때문에 실질적으로 오염물질이 많이 나오고 탄소가 많이 나오는 이런 구조를 가지고 있었기 때문에 정부에서는 두 가지 정책을 썼습니다. LNG를 공급하는 정책과 또 하나는 기존에 있던 중유 발전과 석탄 발전을 LNG 발전으로 교체하면서 오염물질을 줄이고 탄소를 저감시키면서 집단적인 에너지 공급을 효율을 높이는 과정으로 일단은 사업을 유지해 왔던 겁니다. 그렇기 때문에 지금 보면은 지역 난방이라는 이 공급 형태가 한국에 굉장히 크지만 실질적으로 뭐 이게 뭐 한국만 있는 것도 아니고 제가 지금 말씀한 세르비아나 크로에시아나 아니면 인근에 있는 시아에서가 굉장히 많이 있는 구조이기 때문에 딱 한국에 한정되지는 않습니다. 그리고 이제 특이한 현상도 아닙니다. 지금 더 좋은 거는 이제 아까 이제 기후 변화에 대해서 얘기를 계속 하셨는데 아시지만은 올해 이제 파리 기후 협약이 굉장히 결국이 되지 않아서 계속 지연되고 있지만 실질적으로 그게 제대로 되고 각 국가들마다 탄소 제로 내지 탄소 뉴트럴 정책에 쓰게 되면은 대부분 다 이제 신재생 에너지나 수소 에너지에 집중돼서 이제 탄소 이제 중립 정책들을 쓰게 될 때 지역 난방은 그거의 가부적인 역할을 할 수 있습니다. 실질적으로 보면은 신재생 에너지를 통해서 수소 에너지를 생산해서 탄소가 나오지 않는 것을 가기 위해서의 시간이 필요한데 그때 이제 지역 난방처럼 그 에너지, LNG를 천연가스를 사용한 발전 형태가 한동안 지속될 수 있다는 것과 또 하나는 지금 신재생 에너지라든가 이쪽에서 나오는
فحبايبي انا ولينا الحين راح نروح المؤتمر خلص الحين كل شيء خلص فالمؤتمر خلص فهذه هي فقط جلسة يحكي كلمة شكر وهيك فاحنا اوكي احنا طلعنا الحين والمؤتمر خلص انا راح اروح للغرفتي انت شو راح تسوي؟
انا ظاهره مع ماي بوي فريند
어머 오빠 나 올라갈게 방송 끝내고 올라갈게요. 안녕 수고하셨습니다. 수고하셨습니다. 가자.
서로 알고 계시는
수고하셨습니다. 수고하셨습니다. 가자. 가자. فالمهم انا راح اطلع للغرفه تبع حبايبي مشان انزل لكم يعني اصور لكم يعني شو راح اسوي اليوم، لانه اليوم كمان راح انزل لكم فيديو، لا تخافوا. انا بعرف انه لايف اليوم كان كتير ممل، بس لازم تستفيدوا مثل ما احنا استفدنا.
It was exhausting.
تعبنا بس لازم تستفيدوا.
تعبنا mentally.
وشوفوا حبايبي، استنوا مفاجأة بكرة. استنوا مفاجأة بكرة. المشكلة بدي أقفل البث بس أنا يعني إيدي كلهم هيك. شوفوا أوكي، راح أقفل البث لما أوصل لغرفتي. أوكي people. هذا can you put my card?
22?
Yes, thank you.
I guess I'm going up with you.
Yeah, come with me. Come with me, see my home. اوكي لينا راح تروح معايا للغرفة وبعدين بطلع معها. بعدين بنزل معك. ترى ما بعد تكتب يا رب تزوجي جي هوب. امين. شو يا رب تتزوجي جي هوب. شو هذا؟ يا مان حشي.
What is this?
Like seriously?
يلا perfect.
اوكي. اوكي راح اورجيكم الغرفة تبعي. انا هيك لابسة اليوم، لابسة فستان ابيض. Yeah. Again?
لا
Like you're kidding me? You need to do it again.
I need to do it for the third time. يلا 22.
Oh my god seriously like ما راح نروح احنا للغرفة بهالطريقة. اوكي thank you so much. قديش الساعة عندكم الحين حبايبي؟ قديش الساعة؟ what? اوكي السويجة؟ انا الحين ما بقدر اني اكتب اسماء، خلص المؤتمر خلص. المؤتمر خلص. بكره بتصور ان شاء الله وحط لكم صور على الانستغرام. صار لي زمان ما حطيت صور على الانستغرام. يا ربي. اوكي وصلنا. اوكي راح اورجيكم غرفتي يعني بيتي يعني منزلي المؤقت. راح اورجيكم منزلي المؤقت. تعالوا معايا. لازم جد.
هلا بدنا نشوف اذا your room messy ولا لا.
Oh my god.
messy?
Oh my god. Oh my god. ادخلي مرحبا. ادخلي. مرحبا حبيبتي.
انت بتاخدي your shoes off?
No I don't care.
so heavy.
Oh my god yes.
seriously كسرت ايدك.
يا ربي. اوكي انا بالغرفه تبعي انا ولينا. اوكي راح اقفل البث هون حبايبي. اتمنى انه لايف اليوم استفدتوا يعني شوي معانا مثل ما استفدنا احنا. وراح اخلص اللايف اليوم. راح اخلص لايف اليوم هون، وان شاء الله بعد شويه يمكن من هون ل4 ساعات او 5 ساعات بنزل لكم فلوج اليوم يعني شو سويتوا هيك. اوكي فشكرا على مشاهده اللايف معي. احبكم. انيا لينا.
باي جايز.